going on, guys? Welcome back to United View. Hope everyone is doing very well. We are back with another press conference reaction. Erik ten Hag has been talking to the assembled media at Carrington ahead of tomorrow's trip to Stamford Bridge in the Premier League. An 8:15 kickoff tomorrow. And I was really curious to see what was going to be said today. It was one of those press conferences where it felt like it was, you know, more of a sort of formality, just kind of a get to know who's available situation. Maybe not a ton of sort of really super probing questions. My feeling is that's probably going to come in the second part, the embargoed part of the press conference that comes out later on this evening, which we'll cover tomorrow during the pre-match of the match view. But some interesting stuff certainly when it comes to who's just available, who's available to play in defence for us. Of course, we know that Licha Martinez, he's out for a month. We know that Victor Lindelof, he's out for a month. We know that other people are injured in defence, the likes of Luke Shaw and others. But some positive moves. It does look like we do have most likely 3 senior centre-backs available for tomorrow's trip to Stamford Bridge. So we'll be getting into that. A question was asked to Erik ten Hag about why is there so many muscular injuries? Why are we having so many injuries this season? And are you working on that? How are you working on that? He was asked about Mason Mount. He was asked about Chelsea. He was asked about why there is such a drop-off between performances against the likes of Liverpool when you knock them out of the FA Cup versus playing a Brentford side that's really struggled this season. Why is there such a contrast? And he's spoken about a variety of different other things as well. So be sure to smash a like on the like button. Be sure to subscribe, bottom right-hand corner. Can see people filing in as always. You've come for questions, you've come for answers, and we're hopefully going to deliver that as well. Tron says, what's good, Owen? Not much, you know, just April. I'm glad that, I tell you what, every year, April Fool's Day, what's the point? Like, what's the point? It's just, and they're so bad, aren't they? You know, Manchester United have been taken over by such and such, and they're going to be pumping in £10 billion. And you go, well, who's falling for that? And the problem is, a lot of people. No, that is the problem, isn't it? All Elite says, give me the good news, Owen. I'm going to do my very best to give you some positive news anyway. And Simon says, big up UV fam as well. Austin Baker's in there too. Says, yo, big ups, O-Dog. And chat, hope you're having a fantastic day. Likewise, Austin, hope you're having a great day as well. So be sure to click that like button. Be sure to subscribe as well, bottom right-hand corner. You know what to do. So let's start off with some team news. And I guess, given the circumstances, given the discussion, I'm not even joking yet. I don't think I've heard a siren all day today. As soon as I just click that live button, as soon as I click that live button, boom, boom, every time. Like, it makes it seem like it's way more prevalent than it is. Because I swear to God, it's only when I go live. But yes, team news. Some good news, I suppose, when it comes to some team news. Considering this morning we were talking about Maguire and Kambuala, what that would be looking like most likely. Erik ten Hag was asked about if there was any fresh injuries. And he said, quote, no more issues, we don't need. On the front line and midfield, we are okay, and we have options there. But in the back line, we have a lack of options. But the good thing is, back in training this afternoon is Raphael Varane and Johnny Evans. Yesterday, Harry Maguire was back in training. So that was kind of what we were talking about this morning, Flex and myself on the morning view. Be sure to check that out. That it does look like I think he's going to not have to play Willy Kambuala at centre-back. And there's no disrespect to him. Like, he may have a fantastic future at Manchester United. Time will only tell how his career plays out, of course. But certainly that is good news, considering late last night we're thinking Harry Maguire is the only fit senior centre-back to play at Stamford Bridge. And I know that Chelsea are rubbish, and I know Chelsea are in the mud and they've been terrible this season, but they do get up for it when they play bigger teams and big games, and it'll be a big game, and it's away from home. We know our record away from home as well, so it's an important one. You do need players that have experience. Now, what we don't know is the fitness levels of both Varane and Evans. That's what we don't know. I mean, Maguire came on, of course, against Brentford at the weekend, which was a surprise because it was thought that he was a bit of a doubt for that game because he came back from England duty with a bit of a knock, but he played. The fact that he's been back in training yesterday would imply that he's ready to go. With Varane, of course, he came off in the game against Brentford, but it was kind of viewed as precautionary. But of course, you have to look ahead when it comes to Raphael Varane. You can't think about, okay, he's available, he can just play all of the games moving forward. That's not necessarily the case, you have to kind of plan ahead with him, don't you? You have to think, right, he's available today. Do we want to play him today, or do we want to save him for the weekend? So I think I wouldn't be shocked, to be honest with you, if he did go with Johnny Evans and Harry Maguire. I really wouldn't be shocked. He's done that partnership several times this season. I mean, look, he's done a variety of these of partnerships between these three all season because he's been forced to. We don't really know. I think his preference is Rafael Varane and Lisandro Martinez, but how often has he been able to do that this season? Not many times, has he? Johnny Evans, of course, had a knock going into international break, pulled out of the Northern Ireland squad because he had a knock, and seemingly has been recovering since then. He wasn't involved at the weekend, so we don't know how close that will be. So we'll have to wait and see. But I think it is positive in the sense of we're going to have senior centre-backs available for tomorrow, and also importantly for Sunday as well, because I just didn't like the idea of you can maybe get away with Willy Camboire at centre-back for the game against Chelsea at Stamford Bridge, but Old Trafford against Liverpool, that's another level, isn't it? It really is. And that's not to say, of course, people will misconstrue your words when you say this, when you say, oh, you're saying Maguire and Evans are good enough for Manchester United, your standards are in the mud. Well, we're talking about the people who we've got. I'm not an advocate for a long-term partnership of Harry Maguire and Johnny Evans at Manchester United. That's going to win us the league. It's going to get us titles. But it's what we've got right now. It's what we can deal with. So that is some positive news as well. Riri says Varane's dealing with concussion issues. I think that has been kind of misinterpreted. I mentioned this morning. That's kind of been a bit misinterpreted, the concussion stuff. Because I think he came off, unless I'm mistaken, with an ankle problem against Brentford. The concussion thing was more just a general conversation and interview about concussions in football, and he was talking about how he had experienced them throughout his career, during his time with France, during his time with Real Madrid, talking about several instances playing games for his country and the clubs he's been at, and how he's had concussions, or certainly what he believes or perceives to be concussions, and sort of the stigma that's still around them. And if you don't tell a sort of a medical expert, then there's nothing they can do, and you kind of play on autopilot. So people took that and twisted that as like that was a big knock at Man United, and the Man United medical department could be knocked for a variety of different reasons, but that one was, I think, more about sort of a wider football problem. Look, concussions in sport, it still is a really big problem, and for an injury that's becoming, there's so much more known about it, CTE, etc. over the last decade or so, it still is quite a touchy subject. And as I mentioned, in American sport, there's been litigation surrounding it. And I do think when it comes to football across Europe and obviously internationally around the world, I do think that it's going to be something that's going to be coming up in the future. I mean, you already hear these stories of people that played in, the 50s and the 60s and the 70s and 80s that, were heading this rock hard like that football, and it's done actual proper damage to them. So it's still really, really concerning. I think now, you still see it. How often do you see it in games where a player goes down, it's very clear that they've been knocked a bit woozy, and they refuse to come off. I'm fine. And the doctor goes, you're not fine. And then a lot of the time the player gets their way and they come back on. And then sometimes they end up coming off anyway. I mean, it's a real concern. So to circle that one back to Varane, I don't think his current issue is concussion. I think that's something he's been dealing with for the last several years, to be honest. And again, that's a worry as well. So but he's back in training today. Which is good, which is definitely good stuff as well. Next question was about these injuries, and specifically the muscular injuries that we have seen at Manchester United this season. So the question was asked, with these issues, we've spoken all season about it, so many muscular injuries, any idea why? And Erik ten Hag said, we have an idea, but we will work on it. Internally, we will deal with it. Now, the reporter then said, do you care to share the reason? And he said no. He doesn't care to share the reason, but they've got an idea. What you would say is, if you've got an idea, fix it. There's lots of different schools of thought with this, isn't there? And I think each one has a certain different weight to it of how much it contributes to this issue. So when it comes to these muscular injuries at Manchester United this season, you would look at a variety of different things, wouldn't you? You would look at the schedule, which is totally out of control in football. And I think player welfare has really gone out the window. And I do think that it's almost like people don't want to have that conversation because they're multimillionaires. Well, who cares? Who cares if you're run into the ground? You're a millionaire. So we don't care. And that's where's empathy gone? Where's sympathy gone? These are still people at the end of the day, right? We don't want to see them get broken down and have all of these injuries and have to retire early, and because they for our gratification and entertainment, because we want them to play every 3 days for 20, 30 years. That seems crazy. So there's that part of it. There's also the part of our medical department is rubbish. Clear. I mean, you look at the story involving Casemiro. My hamstring hurts. Let's check it out. I'm just a bit concerned because I was out for like 2 or 3 months with this hamstring thing, so I'm a bit worried. Yeah, we think you're fine. You can play. Let me double check. Goes to another doctor. Actually, that could have turned into something. You need some rest. What's going on there? What are the sports scientists doing? What are the doctors doing at Manchester United? And then also, you look towards the coaching staff. You look towards the manager and you say, your training methods, are they contributing to this as well? Are your tactical methods in the game, the fact that they've got to cover so much distance and the gaps in the midfield are so big and the defenders are having to try and cover as much space as possible? Like, is that a problem as well? There are so many different factors and we're so keen, aren't we, to point it on. It's just this, it's just that. It's a combination of everything. We're not alone in the sense that we're the only team that's got injuries this season. Lots of teams have. So that does kind of imply it's a wider football problem. But other teams have less or more. So it's how they handle that better. How are you handling it? What's your tactical setup like? What's your training setup like? What's your medical department like as well? It's a combination of a lot of things too. But he says that Manchester United have an idea and they're going to work on it internally. So we shall see. I mean, maybe that's linked to, it has been widely reported that there's this sort of medical audit going on at United at the moment, and they're stripping back and fixing that medical department. But my goodness me, does they need to fix it, because it's just a complete and total shambles, isn't it? Shenanigans with the super chat says, Van Gaal had 68 injuries in one season despite 75% possession and tactically rigid. Maybe there is more to our issues than blaming the managers every time. Well, that's kind of what I just said. I think that, and it's a conversation that we get into just about everything at the moment, don't we? Results, injuries, transfers. We're always looking for the fall guy, aren't we? We're always looking for someone to blame. And to your point there, I recalled that in Van Gaal's first season where he had all of these injuries. And at the time, the conversation, if I recall correctly, was about training methods and was about sports science and was about other things. So it's a variety of different points, basically. Is there a wider football problem with injuries? It's very clear to see. Every team. Just look at the last international break, how decimated that was international level with all of these injuries, of all of these people pulling out. Because they're hurt, because they're run down, because they're broken, because they've been playing too much football over the last however many years. And then it gets into the territory of, okay, at the moment, I mean, hopefully something will be done about that. We can't do something about that immediately. What can we do immediately to fix it? Or at least try and soften that blow? Do we need to change how we're training on a day-to-day basis? Do we need to change how we're trying to prevent these injuries? Do we need to change on how our tactics are in the game so it doesn't lead to more injuries? Look at like with Jurgen Klopp, when he first came into Liverpool, he had so many injuries because of the training style, because of the tactical style. Like, there's lots of different mitigating factors as well. And then you have situations whereby there was a report about Mason Mount earlier today from Rob Dawson from ESPN, where he was saying that Mason Mount wasn't even intended to be in the squad against Liverpool when we played him in the FA Cup, but he volunteered because Casemiro pulled out, and Ten Hag sort of said, okay, I'll put you in, but we don't have any intention to play you. Then extra time happens and he has to come on. So sometimes other people getting injured messes up other people's recovery plan, which then in turn leads to them getting injured because you're just desperate to having people through the door. So it's all a mess, and they're all contributing to each other, and it's about how can you handle it. Riri says, the idea is the medical team is shit. Matafalu says, save Varane for the weekend. If we lose, what's the justification? We're not in a position to choose. I'd rather we win and gets injured and then lose and not play. Well, I definitely wouldn't want him to get injured again, because I think that's definitely what we do in here. Because if he gets injured, we will complain. And then again, this is when it gets back into that kind of territory, isn't it? You're not ready, play him. He gets injured. Why are all our players getting injured? What's going on here? We need to do what's best for Rafael Varane for the rest of the season. We don't want Rafael Varane to get injured again. We don't want all of these other players to get injured again. And particularly with him, even when he has been fit, you have to manage his schedule. Like, he's not like these other players. That's very clear to see during his time at United. He's not one of those people where it's like, oh, yeah, he can play 2 games in 3 days or 4 days. Now, look, he might now, but often it's been a case of you have to pick one out of the 2 when it comes to him. And if you're going to wait which one is probably more important, you probably would go to that Liverpool game and say, well, we can still get something out of that Chelsea game without a Rafael Varane. Now, like I said, he might play both. They might have to risk it because we're limited when it comes to people that are available, and that gets back into the territory of, if we did have everyone fit, we wouldn't have to take these risks with these players that are then leading to injuries as well. If you haven't already, click the like button. By the way, guys, too. Another question that Ten Hag was asked was about the performance drop-off. Talking about, you play Liverpool, it's a super high, fantastic performance, great moments, and then you go to Brentford and the drop-off is gigantic and such a disappointment. And do you reflect on why and how that happens? Erik Ten Hag said the following. He said, quote, I'm long enough in football to know, and some of you should also understand, why such things happen. Sometimes you are not playing good, but we are Manchester United. You have to win and you cannot give it away like we did. That was the biggest disappointment for me. We keep going. And I kind of do see what he's saying there with that. I mean, look, there's a wider conversation, isn't there, about just our performance levels this season not being very good. We've won games this season, then we come out of it and we say we've played rubbish, we haven't played very well, did we deserve to win, blah, blah, blah. But that was kind of one of the biggest disappointments, wasn't it? I mean, maybe it is the biggest disappointment coming out of the game against Brentford on Saturday, was that, yeah, we played rubbish and yeah, we didn't deserve to win. But we actually did we had the opportunity to do it. Somehow, some way, it presented itself to us that we could come away from a game that we had no business getting 3 points out of with 3 points. And all we had to do was hold on for 5 minutes. That was about it. That's all we had to hold on for. 5 minutes, 4 minutes, not that long. And we couldn't even do that. And I suppose in that sense, he's right. That is the biggest disappointment when it comes to that. Of we were terrible, we were rubbish, we didn't deserve it, but we still had the opportunity to get it, and we fluffed that. We couldn't even do that. We couldn't even hold on for a couple of minutes to win a game we didn't deserve to win. And that's when you get into the territory of mentality. That's when you get into the territory of just what are you doing? And that's when it gets into the mentality of the players going, are you that kind of pathetic that you can't even hold on for a few minutes to win a football match? And then you also look at the manager and say, well, it's not the first time that's happened. Why does that keep happening? Why? How are you not changing that when it comes to these players? Is it a case of those players are incapable of changing, or is your setup not helping that either? Was it just a case of that was inevitable because there are so many gaps anywhere and we didn't pivot to a different tactic as the game once we went 1-0 up? That's also part of it too. But he was keen to say that he believes since Christmas that Man United's performances have been positive and we keep going. That's also what he said about that too. He was also asked, this was quite a good question, about sort of from a man management perspective then, well, how do you handle that? What do you do when you see instances like you saw at the weekend and a huge performance drop-off, and then even when you're not playing well, you don't hold on? What do you do? Do you scream at the players? How do you analyse it from a man management point of view? And Ten Hag said, quote, it depends on the situation you are in as a team, also how the players see it, how they express it on the pitch. Then you take a strategy, how to handle this. So he kind of, he's not going to go, I screamed at the players, I shouted at the players, I told them they were pathetic and they're not good enough. But there is no way Erik ten Hag can go into the dressing room, and I wouldn't believe this happened at all, and said like nothing, or unlucky lads, you'd be furious, wouldn't you? You'd be furious, like us fans. You'd be absolutely furious for a variety of reasons. You'd be furious of that performance was shit. Then you'd be furious of, even though the performance was shit, we should have won that game, and you didn't, because you can't even hold on for a couple of minutes. You're not even strong enough to do that. You can't even do that properly. So there's no way he doesn't rip into them. Now, in fairness, some players might push back and say, well, the only reason we're playing rubbish is because this setup and blah, 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 blah. And maybe those are valid arguments, but there's no way he doesn't. You can't. He goes into these press conferences week after week after week in interviews and says, good is not good enough. That wasn't even good. So we're not even into the territory of good isn't good enough. It hasn't been good for quite a while. So I think that from a man management perspective, I'd be very surprised if he's not having a go. But the proof is in the pudding as well. You would also say, where is that mentality shift? Where is that mentality change? Because we have seen, if you go back to the beginning of last season, those first two games and how bad we were, and we have seen in matches that those players can get up for it. And I remember when we beat Liverpool last season in the league, and the high fives and the fist bumps and all that, and you felt like, oh, right, they've got it. They've got the mentality change. They've got the shift. That's what it needs to be. And then they just fall back into familiar patterns. It only feels like it's flashes as opposed to sort of consistent mentality change. It's not permanent. It's only temporary, and it only lasts for 90 minutes, or even this season, not even 90 minutes. It lasts for 20 minutes. It doesn't last for several months. It doesn't last for this amount of time. Last season, it did last for a few months, didn't it? It lasted from sort of September, October time to sort of until we won the Carabao Cup. And you sort of went, right, I can see the sort of mentality there. I can see the fight. This team's got something. This manager's got something. And now it's just kind of reverted back to type once again, which is incredibly frustrating as well. What are people saying here in the chat at the moment? Red Scare Claire says, guys are probably getting pushed past their recoverable volume. I think that is definitely a thing with the injuries as well. Like I said, I think the schedule in football is just completely out of hand. There is so much nonsense football that's being played nowadays, particularly with international breaks and Nations League, and they're going to revamp the Club World Cup, and that's going to add more games. Of course, they're going to add more teams to the Champions League, which might benefit us this season to qualify. But that fixture schedule is expanding, and it feels like it's very rare now that you have a summer without any form of football. I've seen, and this has been a thing for quite some time now, but it still, to me, is baffling. Teams that finish the season and then they have friendlies in another country with a Premier League team. How baffling is that? I remember, I think it was Chelsea. I want to say, this is a while ago, maybe 2018, 2019, around that period of time. And they had a friendly, I think before a final. It might have been that Europa League final or something of that nature. Well, they had a post-season friendly, and they got injured players. And you just go, what? Why is that? And the answer is, it's money. That's all it's about. It's just about money. It's just about revenue. It's just about getting games on television, ad sponsorships or corporate sponsorships or what have you. Will sponsor your team as long as you commit to doing a post-season friendly in this country. And obviously, look, it's great for those to attend that can't ever get to see a team play in their country. I totally understand that. But at the same time, it's ludicrous, isn't it? And then we wonder why players get injured or completely break down or retire really early because they can't handle it. Nobody could. These are professional athletes as well. When asked about the injuries once again, Erik ten Hag was asked if he has changed things as the season goes on to try and prevent these injuries. And Erik ten Hag said the following. He said, "You can't prevent. It's not only us who've had this. The standards of the Premier League from an intensity perspective are so high. The overload of the schedule. International football is so huge. We have internationals in our squad. City, Liverpool and Newcastle have problems. Many other teams. In this moment, especially the defensive department, but the midfield and frontline players, the players are available." And that's why I sort of say that I do think it is a wider football problem because we're not the only team that have had injuries. Now, you can argue, though, we've had it maybe worse than others. Newcastle have had it particularly bad too, but we've had it worse than others. But I think that's, once again, when you get into the territory of injury prevention and your medical departments, that, yes, other teams have been dealt really badly, have had really sort of been dealt a bad hand when it comes to injuries, but how have they handled it? How are they managing it? Do they manage it better when it comes to, okay, when these players are coming back, they're not going to get injured again, so our medical department's really good, our sports science department's really good. Do they manage it effectively with, that's just the way football's going nowadays, so you've got to have a really strong and deep squad, so your recruitment's really important too. That's why whenever we do sort of summer transfers and people go, they're not going to be happy because this is going to move so-and-so to the bench, it's a squad game. It's a squad game. You're going to need that 23, 24, 25 plus man squad and your academy players to get you through the season. That's been evident for a lot of teams this season. So that gets into the territory of how do you manage it. If we're saying that the schedule is just completely, unavoidable at this point, and that's the way that football's going, maybe it's going in that direction where the days of having this sort of 23-man squad, that ain't enough anymore. You've got to have 30. You need to have 25 top senior players, and then you need that 5 from the academy that could also step in. Like, is that where football is going? Maybe that is part of it, and that's why recruitment's so important too. And also, whilst you're recruiting those players, you look at their injury history and say, right, what are they? Have they been prone to getting hurt? What's their injury record like? Can they handle the volume of games too? That's part of it as well, and that's when you get into FFP and PSR, but that's why you got to put money in your academy, because that's the real gold mine, isn't it? I mean, everything is shifted towards academy football, because if you've got a strong academy, obviously, that comes into the first team, boom, no problem. You can have people like Kobbie Mainoo, they can make a massive difference, although he feels like a bit of a generational player. But you can have those players that come in and contribute. Look at Manchester City. They're a great example of this. They just bring academy players through and they're quality. And then also, if they're not totally to the level that they need to be, you sell them and you get pure profit. So that and then you can bring in more people to your squad, and that can help. And that's how you get around the PSR stuff. So I think that's just where football's going, is that it's all about squads have to get bigger. And because of FFP and PSR, that just means it's got to be more academy players. Can you put more money into your academy? And then if they're not good, you help yourself from PSR because it's pure profit. But if they are good, it contributes to your team, and you have your homegrown quotas and your under 18s players or whatever the limit is as well, so you don't have to register them. I think that's probably where it's going. But I don't know if that is a good thing. I don't know if that's a good thing in the sense of from a player. Player welfare point of view, that's the word I'm looking for as well. Kishan says, I get Liverpool as our bigger rival, but most important is get as many points as possible. Every game is worth 3 points. No game is worth more at this stage than any other. Players shouldn't be risked just because it's Liverpool. Well, I kind of agree and disagree in the sense of, obviously, look, every game is 3 points. So in terms of the points weighted, on paper, the Chelsea game is just as important as the Liverpool game. My point is that your likelihood of winning the game could be different, obviously, depending on the players that you've got and the team you're facing. If you're facing a poor Chelsea side, you're more likely to get away with not having to play a Raphael Varane and still be able to get 3 points. Against a Liverpool side, if you don't play a Raphael Varane, you've got maybe less chance of getting those 3 points. So it's about, again, what's better worth the risk in terms of getting the most points possible. I think that's kind of the way that I look at it. Some might look at it and say, well, we're unlikely to win the Liverpool game, so you want to put the strongest team possible for the Chelsea game, definitely win that one, and then see what happens when it comes to the Liverpool game. But I get your point, Kishan, that obviously both on paper are worth 3 points, but I suppose it's more that it's who you can get away with. It's because, look, I think it's because it's Chelsea, and Chelsea still are a big name, but if we were playing, I don't know, let's pick Sheffield United away from home and then playing Liverpool, you go, oh, don't worry about that Sheffield United game, worry about Liverpool at home. So Varane, make sure you have that one. I mean, maybe because it's Chelsea, that's kind of what skews it, but Chelsea just, they're not good. They're not they're not good. Matifalo says, how are we not training? We've been out of cup since December with the odd midweek games. What are we doing during the week? Too many excuses from Ten Hag now. He does answer that question in just a second, actually, Matifalu. This was the next question, was have you had to change your training methods since this season due to your schedule? And he said, quote, "We don't train because we recover, then you go to the next game." So he's basically saying that the idea of the training maybe is too intense is not accurate because we don't train. It's just recovery at this stage of the season, which is kind of true and it's kind of not true. You know, it's true in the sense of they do tend to say in football that once you get to this stage of the season, you sort of late March, April, May, that the idea of having, you know, these sort of intense training sessions that you would have early on in the season or even in pre-season, it's just night and day. It's all about recovery, injury prevention, and sort of tactical stuff for the weekend. It's not really about that sort of intense training you would associate with earlier on in the season. But as many people have pointed out, because we're not in any of these competitions, we've got the FA Cup, obviously, in the Premier League. It's not like our schedule was around this time last year when we were still in the Europa League and we were playing every 3 days or every 4 days. It's not as intense as it once was, but in fairness, you have sort of seen now, with us going into the latter stages of the FA Cup, games are now getting rearranged. We've obviously got the Sheffield United game was rearranged because of the Liverpool FA Cup game. Which game has been rearranged because we're playing in the semi-final? Someone can let me know in the chat which one that is. So now we're going to have a couple of midweek games between now and the end of the season. There's only a few games left. There's 9 games left between now and the end of the season. But this has been a problem throughout the entirety of the season. This isn't just like a now thing, is it? It's been constant for Manchester United this season too. He was also asked about Mason Mount. Mason Mount, of course, going to be involved, certainly going to be in the squad against Chelsea tomorrow. Whether or not he'll be starting, time will tell. As I mentioned earlier on, there was a really interesting article written by Rob Dawson from ESPN about Mason Mount. It's actually really in-depth, talking about his injury recovery, his time sort of adjusting to Manchester and Manchester United, talking about his exit from Chelsea as well, that sort of the narrative that he turned down all these contract offers just isn't really accurate, isn't true. It was they were allegedly asking for offers as early as December 2022 for Mason Mount, and he was in regular contact with Jurgen Klopp, regular contact with Arsenal, to the point that Mikel Arteta said that it was a done deal, and obviously ended up at Manchester United anyway. And I do kind of push back with those people that were like, I just, forced his way out of Chelsea. Look at the way Chelsea operate. Look at the way they've operated, particularly with homegrown players. They get rid of them. Like, that's their out clause. That's their way out. This coming summer, it will be the same. They'll most likely get rid of a Conor Gallagher. They'll most likely get rid of a Reece James, because they're in financial issues when it comes to PSR and FFP. So they'll look at the list. Who's homegrown? This one, this one, this one. Get rid of them. So I don't necessarily. I can see the reality in that when it comes to his Chelsea departure. As far as will he play tomorrow, I don't think he'll start. I still think they're being extra cautious about whether or not he's going to start the game, because he's been out for so long. But as I mentioned, he was asked about him, and he said, quote, "He's a fantastic football player, but it's important first that he's getting and keeping fit, because he had 3 injuries, like with Leacher. Another injury you want to avoid, and we have to do this carefully. The first objective is to keep him fit. Then he can benefit and continue to the team like he did on Saturday when he had a big impact." So I would be surprised if Mason Mount started tomorrow in midfield. I think most likely it would probably be a Kobbie Mainoo and Casemiro once again, Bruno in front of them, and I think Mason Mount would be on the bench once more. We have seen that just because you come on and score a goal doesn't necessarily mean you start. Look at Anthony against Liverpool. So I think Mount will start once again on the bench. Maybe he'll have more time on the pitch or something. But someone's been out for so long, you hope that it does work out. I want any signing at Manchester United to work out. So far, it hasn't at all for him, not at all. And the hope is, and I think the aim is for him and United between now and the end of the season, would just be he just needs to stay fit. If he can just stay fit between now and the end of the season, that's the key aim. Because I said it a lot whilst he was out, and I'll stick by it. If he has another another muscular injury, then you go like, okay, this is not good, because you've done your calf, you've done your hamstring. Last season it was your hip. Like, we get into that territory of these are all different injuries. Something's not right. So my hope is that he can stay fit. My hope is that he can contribute. We don't know. We don't know what Mason Mount can do for Manchester United because we've barely seen him. That was his first goal for United, wasn't it? So hopefully there's more to come. But I don't think he starts tomorrow. I think that would probably be a bit too much, too soon for him, in all honesty. And finally, he was asked about Chelsea, and if he's surprised they're not higher up the table this season in the Premier League. Ten Hag said, quote, "It's a tough competition. It's very tight, and also a lot about which players are available and not. When you're on the right side of the line, you can have a successful season, but when on the wrong side, you can have a much more difficult season. For the rest, they have a fantastic team, fantastic players, and play very good football. They can beat anyone and have shown in this league." But when it comes to Chelsea, we're not alone when it comes to injuries. They've had their fair share, certainly, as well. I would recommend to go watch the preview of Flex and Matisse because, they've had several injuries too. Every press conference, there's a new one. But my biggest thing with Chelsea is I don't know how many times I've said this now. I remember saying it during the summer when they were even signing those players and people were getting excited because they spent all that money on the midfield. They're getting Caicedo, they're getting Lavia, they're getting Enzo Fernandez. Oh, look, they're going to be brilliant now. Chelsea are going to be great. There is just no evidence the way that they operate as a football club has ever worked in like English football, or let alone just like major European football. Their idea was, we're going to buy all of these sort of young players. Do you know if they're any good or not? We don't know. We're going to buy them. It's going to be a team full of young players, and they're going to be good. What about structure? What about putting them together? We don't know. They are just, again, a complete and total mess in terms of their operation. They're doing a thing where their chairman changes every 5 years because they take turns. When Todd Bowley and Clear Lake took over them, they got rid of the directors and basically put themselves in for a while. You had Todd going around Europe. We're going for a meal and going to Barcelona and going for a meal and trying the transfer strategy was, let's try and hijack other people's deals. And it makes for great headlines and makes for great social media chatter. But once it actually gets onto the pitch, they're madness. And I still think now the coverage of them, and this was also my biggest thing, and maybe it's because Man United fan us against the world, I don't know. But I just think of the double standard. Like, at this point, it's been accepted that Chelsea are terrible, they're rubbish, and people don't pile in still as much. They're mid-table. They're in the bottom half. Like, as much as we like to talk about our standards on the floor, Manchester United, rah. Like, we've never been that bad. And look at the scrutiny Erik ten Hag gets, rightfully so, for certain things. But for being sixth, look at last season. Last season was actually successful. We finished third, got to an FA Cup final, won a trophy, and he was still under pressure. Is he good enough? Isn't he good enough? Oh, I'm not really sure. Chelsea, let's be big almighty Chelsea. Big Chelsea. Champions League winning Chelsea, win all these titles, mid-table. Oh, what a disaster. It's happened again. Like, it literally, it's happened again. And I just think the coverage of it has been laughable in comparison. I mean, at this point, like I said, they are a joke. They are just complete. And that doesn't change if they beat us, by the way, tomorrow. They still are. Like, the way they operate is mad. But it's kind of just been accepted. And I think, imagine if it was the shoe was on the other foot. You would never hear the end of it. Never hear the end of it. And Pyramid Scheme says, nah, Owen, get a grip. When was the last time Chelsea won the Champions League or the Premier League? Well, to answer both those questions, more recently than us, my friend, yeah? So let's not play down that Chelsea aren't a big club, because they are. They absolutely are. 2-time Champions League winners. They won the league last, was it 2016? 2016 to 17? Antonio Conte? So it's not in our position to talk them down like they're not big. That's also part of it as well. People try and pretend that they're not this big club. Of course they are. Of course they're a big team. They've won everything in the last 2 decades. They dominated, winning titles. That's why people go back to this whole this Man City Liverpool rivalry is one of the greatest rivalries in Premier League history. Bullshit, is it? Talk about the Chelsea United rivalry in the mid 2000s. That was back and forth for longer, and both teams really distributed the silverware too. So the idea like they haven't done anything recently, that's why it's mad. They won the Champions League 3 years ago. And now, for the last 2, they've been mid-table. They won the Champions League so recently that when this Club World Cup thing is coming around, next summer, they're already in. That we're not in that competition. They're in that competition because they more recently won the Champions League, so they've snuck in. They've got no business being in it. The way they play and the way that what they've done for the last 2 years, it's a madness. And that's also why I look at Chelsea and just go like, does no one see this? Like, what are they doing? And it will happen, by the way, this coming year too. In the summer, they'll do it again. They'll sign these players, and then, even United fans, they'll get like jealous, or they'll start going, oh, Chelsea, they're further ahead in the project. Look at Chelsea, they're making major moves. What major moves are they making? Down. The only moves they're going is down the table. Their aim is just to get into the top half this season. It's madness how they operate. Absolutely incredible. And I just think, the shoe was on the other foot. But there you go. So there you go, guys. That's the press conference for you. Be sure to smash a like on the like button. We haven't got 100 likes. If you haven't already, click the likes button. Be sure to subscribe, bottom right-hand corner. Yes. Pyramid also says, they've been a joke since 2022. We've been a joke since 2012. Humility, brother. 2 seconds ago, Pyramid, you said when was the last time they'd won anything? I'm not sure what the point you're trying to make. You've got both sides immediately. And also, if you want to talk about humility, 2 seconds ago you said, what did they win? They won the Champions League not that long ago. What? I don't understand. Nevertheless, there you go. Reminder, guys, What the Devil is coming back 6 p.m. It's a day earlier this week. It's a day earlier this week because there's a game tomorrow. So 6 p.m. that's coming, so be sure to check that out. Collaboration between United View and United District. Then tomorrow we got a full match day. Flex lied, by the way. Tomorrow, 9 a.m., there isn't a morning show live. There's a combined 11. KG and Matisse. That's going to be at 9 tomorrow morning. Then there's going to be the road trips probably about midday-ish tomorrow. And then, of course, we'll have full match day coverage. We'll have the match view starting 2 hours before kickoff. So that's at 6:15. I'll be on there for the pre-match, giving you some team news, some news throughout the day, Ten Hag's quotes from his embargoed part of his press conference. Then we'll be going over to UVHQ 30 minutes before kickoff, as always, so be sure to join us then. There's plenty to get into. Be sure to smash a like on the like button. Be sure to subscribe, bottom right-hand corner. I'm out of it. Have a good one. Peace.